Chapter 33. You're saying that Owen is in contact with your subordinates? He wants you to work for him? Su Len was holding an iron skewer and roasting a sturgeon over the bonfire. The delicious sturgeon was smeared with Sullen's special seasoning and emitted an enticing aroma as it roasted over the fire. Johnson swallowed his saliva and forced himself to look away from the fragrant sturgeon that was roasted to a crisp on the outside. Yes, when we were with his caravan earlier, he asked us to work for him, but I refused. Well done. Su Len blew on the grilled fish and took a bite of the juiciest part of the fish. The special seasoning mixed with the sweet and smooth fish flesh brought the taste buds the best enjoyment. Gulp. The sound of someone swallowing came from the side. Here's the seasoning, go roast it yourself. Don't be an eyesore here. Su Len took out a small bottle of seasoning from his pocket and casually tossed it to Johnson. Thanks, boss. Johnson caught the small bottle in a panic and carefully sniffed it. He then grinned at Su Len and left excitedly. Su Len finished the grilled fish in his hand in a few bites and rubbed his belly with satisfaction. He picked up the ale beside him and drank a few mouthfuls before letting out a comfortable burp. After dinner, Su Len asked Johnson to gather the barbarian warriors for a short meeting. After that, he wandered back to sleep and completely ignored Owen's little actions. Owen had been worried that Su Len would come looking for him, so he had specially prepared a set of excuses. However, he was surprised that Su Len didn't respond. This made Owen a little uncertain, but he still didn't give up on recruiting the barbarians. After learning about the rewards that Su Len had given to the barbarians, he increased the rewards by several times and continued to lobby. He didn't mention any other titles or fiefs at all. Unexpectedly, he actually succeeded this time. The barbarians that had ignored him yesterday actually agreed to his recruitment. However, although they agreed to the recruitment, he still needed Sullen's approval to take these barbarian warriors away. However, Owen didn't think that it was a problem. As the manager of the Bohemia Chamber of Commerce, he wasn't an ordinary merchant. One had to know that he was involved in the arms trade. Since ancient times, how could ordinary merchants be involved in the arms trade? The owner of the Bohemia Chamber of Commerce was Marquis Chrisman. At the same time, he had countless connections with the royal family. Otherwise, where did the Centaur tribe's Thunder Knights get the war horses from? With the royal family and Marquis Chrisman backing him up, he didn't believe that Su Len, a nobleman who was pioneering, would dare to not give him face. Therefore, after confirming that the barbarian warriors had agreed to his recruitment, Owen immediately came to discuss with Su Len. What did you say? You want me to let those barbarian warriors go? Su Len slammed the table with an angry expression. It seemed that he was ready to attack in the next second. Sir Su Len, I know that this will be a great loss to you, so I'm willing to compensate you for your loss. Owen's expression was calm and relaxed. He displayed aristocratic etiquette incisively and vividly, as if he was a true noble. Owen clapped his hands lightly. A servant behind him walked forward and placed the black wooden box in his hands on the table between the two of them. Then he respectfully retreated. Sir Su Len, as long as you agree to let those barbarian warriors who are willing to leave, here are 500 kinner. This is the Bohemia Chamber of Commerce's support for your development of your territory. With that, Owen gently opened the wooden box, revealing a box full of kinner. Su Len didn't say anything. He reached out and grabbed a handful of kinner. The heavy texture, the cold temperature, and the sparkling golden light. The cute kinner was so tempting. Looks like you've made your decision, Owen said with a smile, like a spring breeze. He sneered in his heart. Another short-sighted noble. It looked like this territory wouldn't last long. Perhaps when his caravan came from Owen's special city again, this place would be in ruins again. When was the last time something like this happened? 2 years ago or 3 years ago? There seemed to be no trace of what happened to that territory. Now that he thought about it, the grass on that noble's grave was 3 feet tall. I refuse. The kinner slipped from his hand and fell into the box again. There was a melodious sound of metal hitting metal. What? Owen looked at the young noble in front of him in surprise. He obviously didn't expect Su Len to refuse him. Ding dong! Ding dong! The sound of Kinner hitting metal rang in his ears. Su Len said in a serious tone, "Those barbarians are my private guards. They have accompanied me through many bloody and corpse-strewn battlefields. They have borne countless hot-blooded glories. They are my most trusted comrades, my closest companions, and my sworn brothers. Do you understand? You have to add more money. Add another 1,000 Kinner and 2 carts of food." Owen took a few deep breaths and forced himself to calm down. Then, a trace of disdain flashed in his eyes. "Deal." Su Len slammed the table and said very straightforwardly, "But I want the 1,500 Kinner in cash. The things must be delivered to me today, or the deal is invalid." "Okay." Owen agreed immediately. He didn't bargain with Su Len anymore. He didn't want to stay here for another minute. Not long after that, Owen sent his men to deliver the promised Kinner and supplies. He didn't even bother with the noble etiquette. He left his territory with the caravan and 17 barbarian warriors. Su Len was in a very good mood after receiving another 1,500 Kinner and 2,000 pounds of food. He didn't care about Owen's attitude at all, and personally sent the caravan out of his territory. Su Len didn't plan to keep the 1,500 Kinner in his hands. Money couldn't be put to good use in his hands. Although his territory was developing well, the population was too small. He planned to buy some ordinary slaves and let them farm for him. The price of these serfs wasn't high. A serf could be bought for 2 Kinner. This time, he planned to buy 500 serfs at once. As for the remaining 500 Kinner, he would use it to buy food. Of course, he wouldn't leave his territory now. Without him in the territory, who knew if the gnolls would rebel or if the monsters in the wilderness would take the opportunity to attack. Therefore, he could only let his men go. The candidate was the former mercenary leader, Xian. Su Len had just discovered that this cowardly mercenary leader was also a talent. After officially joining his territory, Su Len found that Xian's attribute panel had a trade skill. Chapter 34. Xian's attributes were very simple. He was much weaker than a barbarian, but he had an advantage that others didn't. Trade. You can communicate better with people by observing their expressions. You can get a better understanding of the prices of goods. You can get a better deal by observing people's expressions. Xian was originally a normal mercenary. After joining the territory, he was prepared to become a free citizen. Of course, he was still required to defend his territory if it was attacked. After Su Len discovered his talent in trading, he decided to train him to be the exclusive merchant of his territory. In fact, every noble would have one or several caravans to transport and sell the products of their territory. After all, if they relied on the products of their territory, it wouldn't be difficult for them to maintain their lives, but it wouldn't be easy for them to develop and expand. Su Len originally wanted to wait until his territory had a stable output next year before starting to form a merchant group. It seemed that he would have to bring it forward. "Xian, I'm going to appoint you as the manager of my merchant group. Do you have any requests?" Su Len looked at the muscular middle-aged man in front of him. "Monseigneur, you want to appoint me as the manager of your merchant group? I have no objections. I'm happy to serve you." Originally, Jean was a little uneasy and worried that Su Luin would come to settle accounts with him because of the last battle. He didn't expect that Su Luin would let him be the steward of the caravan. Jean agreed without thinking. "That's good. As the manager of the merchant group, you will be given 20 acres of farmland. However, this is only for temporary use. If you don't do a good job, it will be taken back. If you do a good job, it will be your reward. Of course, this is only the most basic reward. I'll form the merchant group as soon as possible. I'll give you 1 day to arrange your personal matters. We'll officially start tomorrow morning." After that, Su Len waved his hand, indicating that Xian could leave. Su Len didn't fully trust Xian. Xian's loyalty was only 76. It wasn't high, but it wasn't low either. However, this loyalty wasn't enough for Su Len to fully trust him. That was why Xian, the manager of the caravan, didn't care about money. He would never use money to test a person's heart because most people couldn't withstand this kind of test. The best way was to set up a reasonable system to prevent such situations as much as possible. 1,500 Kinner Sulen were given to Johnson for safekeeping. He was going to let Johnson be the leader of the guards of the caravan. Johnson's loyalty had already reached 100%. He was loyal to him and would never betray him. With Johnson in charge of Kinner, Sulen could rest assured. Other than being the captain of the guards, Johnson was also tasked with monitoring Xian. As for the other guards of the caravan, Sulen had already prepared them. The next morning, the camp became very lively. The barbarian warriors who had left with Owen 2 days ago had all returned. What about Owen? Sorry, I've already given him to you. It's your own fault for not looking after him. You can't blame me for this. Even if Owen came back to ask for him, Owen wouldn't admit it. Besides, neither side had left any written evidence when they made the deal. He could only hold his nose and admit it. He didn't have the guts to fight with Sulen. With the military power of Sulen's territory, Sulen could easily wipe out his caravan 3 times without breaking a sweat. So this time he had lost both the woman and the money. Who gave you the courage to come to my territory and steal from me? What do you mean you want to return the money? Why should I return the money I swindled? Of course, he could also use Marquis Chrisman's name, but if he did that, his career as a manager of the caravan would be over. The nobles wouldn't care if you were swindled or not. Once they found out that you had caused a huge loss to the merchant guild, the first thing they would do was ask you to pay up and kick you out. Sulen was completely fearless. These barbarian warriors who had just returned were the guards of the caravan. The carriages that were used to transport supplies were also there. Xian and the others took 20 carriages and left the territory, heading towards Kalt. The carriages were also filled with all kinds of furs that they had harvested from hunting in the territory. When they returned, the territory's population would explode. Ding! Territory Dungeon Quest unlocked. A giant tiger has appeared near your territory. The tiger's existence threatens the safety of the territory's residents. Please eliminate the tiger as soon as possible. Suddenly, the Empire's war game system notification rang in his ears. Sulen was slightly stunned. Territory Dungeon Quest? After hearing the system notification, Sulen immediately switched out the system interface to check. Dungeon Quest. Eliminate the giant tiger that invaded your territory. Reward. Generous reward. The system gave very few notifications. Sulen looked at it for a while and remembered that wild monsters would spawn in the wild every once in a while. This territory dungeon should be one of them. In the game, these wild monsters would usually drop some good items. Boss, we're missing 3 cows. Sulen had just closed the system interface when a barbarian warrior hurried over. What happened? Boss, when Jonathan went to herd the cows today, he noticed that the number of cows was wrong. 3 cows were missing, and there was a huge gap in the fence. We don't know what kind of animal attacked the cattle pen. Monster attack. Sulen was slightly stunned. Then, he suddenly thought of the dungeon quest. Could this be a clue to the quest? Thinking of this, Sulen did not delay and immediately got up to go to the cattle pen. The cattle pen was outside the camp. If he let these wild cows stay here, his camp would probably become smelly in a few days. Therefore, he specially marked out an area outside the city and used logs to build a cattle pen. At the same time, he arranged for people to look after it. When he arrived at the cattle pen, Sulen quickly saw the damaged fence. He saw that the logs that were half a meter thick had been broken by a huge force. The surrounding fence was also broken into pieces. The scene was a mess. The logs used to build the fence were very sturdy. To destroy it to this extent required a very strong force. Even the barbarians could not compare. When he came closer, on the grass beside the fence, there were a few large paw prints on the ground. Seeing this, Sulen could confirm that the destruction of the cattle pen was caused by the giant tiger mentioned by the system. You guys go find some wood and repair this place. Sulen ordered the others to repair the cattle pen. He himself followed the clues on the ground and prepared to search. There were many paw prints on the ground. They looked like cat paw prints, but these paw prints were many times bigger than cat paw prints. The paw prints extended outwards. Following the paw prints, Su Len quickly arrived in the wilderness. At this time, the paw prints were damaged by other animals and had become a little blurry. However, he could still distinguish them. Soon, Su Len followed the paw prints to a forest. Chapter 35. It was very far away from the territory. The surroundings were quiet and the light in the woods was a little dim. Su Luen soon found some traces. A large number of thorns on the ground were broken. The creases were very new and the broken branches had not completely withered. Obviously, animals had passed through here. Taking the spear out of the storage space, Su Len walked into the woods. As he went deeper, the eerie feeling became more and more intense. Soon he saw 3 rotten corpses. The corpses were short, about 1.5 meters tall. Their skin was green, and they had pointed ears. Obviously, they were 3 goblins. Su Len poked one of the corpses with his spear. The sternum is completely broken. These guys were hammered to death by a blunt object. Was it a mace? Their ribs were broken, and their spines were broken. There were no other wounds on their bodies. This kind of strength was not much different from his. These unlucky guys were killed in seconds as soon as they met. Su Luen even doubted whether they had seen who attacked them. The goblins were very poor. The 3 in front of him were wearing tattered clothes. If there were to be a ranking of the monsters that adventurers hated the most, the goblins would definitely be at the top. These goblins were not only numerous but also poor. There were not many spoils after killing them. It was a loss. Throwing the corpses aside, Su Len continued to go deeper into the woods. Not long after, Su Len found some more bones. However, this time it was not a goblin but a bison. This bison that was more than 2 meters long and weighed at least 500 kilograms had become a pile of bones. The meat on its body had been eaten. Seeing this pile of bones, Su Len knew that he had found the right place. As he went deeper, the stench became more and more intense. After going around a big tree, a gust of evil wind blew. Whoosh! Su Len only felt the stench. Without thinking, he whipped forward without hesitation. With a muffled sound, a strong force came from his hand. He could not help but take 2 steps back. There was an angry roar in his ear. Roar! The sound was deafening, and there was a trace of pain in it. Giant tiger? Found you. After taking a few steps back and stabilizing himself, Su Len clearly saw the monster that had attacked him just now. It was a tiger. This tiger was huge, far bigger than other tigers. Its limbs were strong, and its claws and teeth were sharp. Just by standing there, one could feel a heavy pressure. The giant tiger in front of him was obviously not an ordinary beast. It was more than 3 meters tall and 8 meters long. Su Len also felt a strong magic power from its body. It was obvious that this giant tiger was a magic beast. It was his tail that had attacked Su Len. The territory instance dungeon has been activated. Please defeat the giant tiger in front of you. The system's cold voice rang in his ears. Roar! The giant tiger roared and suddenly pounced on Su Len. His huge body didn't slow down at all. In an instant, it crossed a distance of more than 10 meters and clawed at Su Len's head. Su Len didn't take the attack head-on. His body moved slightly, and when he appeared again, he was already several meters away. The tiger's claw slammed heavily on the thick tree trunk. This tree that had grown for at least a few hundred years and had a diameter of more than 3 meters was directly broken. With its huge body, tyrannical strength, and not weak agility, this giant tiger could easily wipe out an army with just these close combat abilities. That claw just now would have heavily injured most of the barbarian guards, except for Johnson. As for the giant tiger's defense, although he hadn't tested it yet, Su Len guessed that it wouldn't be too weak. Seeing that Su Len had dodged its attack, the giant tiger didn't slow down and pounced on Su Len again. This time, Su Len didn't dodge. The heavy fine iron spear in his hand swept across the air, and then heavily hit the giant tiger's claw. A crisp sound of bone breaking could be heard. Then, there was a mournful roar, and the giant tiger's claw was bent in a strange direction. It was obvious that the giant tiger's arm had been broken. Feeling the pain, The giant tiger was incomparably angry. As a high-grade magical beast, it hadn't been injured in a long time. Now it was injured by an ant that it could kill with one claw. Only by completely tearing the enemy into pieces and swallowing them into its stomach could it vent its anger. A furious roar was heard, and the trees in the forest were shaken back and forth. Dozens of green wind blades appeared out of thin air, and then flew at Su Len at an extremely fast speed. The wind blades tore through trees, rocks, and everything in front of them was torn apart, and finally flew straight at Su Len. Su Len didn't even think about it. A cold chill spread out from his body, and in the next second, 3 ice blades appeared out of thin air, and then slashed at the green wind blades at an even faster speed. Only a series of popping sounds could be heard. The green wind blades collided with the 3 ice blades, and then dozens of wind blades were shattered. The green air suddenly exploded, and quickly dissipated into the air. A 5-meter radius of the center of the explosion seemed to have experienced a hurricane, and all the withered trees and grass fell and snapped in all directions. Holding the deformed spear, Su Len quickly rushed toward the giant tiger. A shadow flashed across the air, and in the next second, Su Len appeared beside the giant tiger, and the heavy spear smashed down with a shadow. The giant tiger felt a sharp pain on its head before it could react. The intense pain stimulated the giant tiger's ferocity, and it attacked with its claws without caring about anything else. Jumping, blocking, and whipping fiercely, Sullen's powerful strength made his attacks destructive beyond imagination. Muffled hitting sounds could be heard continuously, and the sound of bones breaking could be heard continuously. The giant tiger with a huge body never thought that one day, its huge body would be whipped back and forth like a sandbag. Su Len directly dodged part of the giant tiger's crazy attacks, and when he couldn't dodge, he took them directly. However, in the face of Su Len, who was stronger than it, the giant tiger's attacks didn't have much effect. Even if its sharp claws fell on Sullen's body, it could only make sparks on the beast face iron armor, and didn't even leave a deep scratch. In the face of this situation, the giant tiger also began to feel afraid. The pain in its body made it understand that if it didn't escape now, it would probably die here. Thinking of this, the giant tiger suddenly turned its body, and a tiger tail that was several meters long whipped Sullen's body instantly. The huge force made him involuntarily take a few steps back. The giant tiger took advantage of the distance and turned around to escape. However, it underestimated Sullen's speed. Seeing the reward in his hands and wanting to escape, Su Len rushed up without thinking. The severely deformed spear in his hand smashed down fiercely, and a shrill tiger cry was heard. The giant tiger's back claws were already bent out of shape, and the heavily injured claws could no longer support its body. The giant tiger's huge body fell down with a loud bang. Chapter 36. Both of its claws were broken. The giant tiger struggled to escape, but it was impossible. Su Len jumped a few times and arrived in front of the giant tiger. The giant tiger looked very miserable at this time. His huge head was bruised and swollen. Seeing the giant tiger in pain, Su Len could not bear it. Then he stabbed the giant tiger with his spear and ended its pain. "I am too kind." Seeing that it returned to heaven peacefully, Su Len was relieved. Ding! The giant tiger is dead. Mission completed. Calculating the reward. The giant tiger is dead. You have received 20,000 experience points. Congratulations, host. Your level has increased. You have received 2 free attribute points. You have received 2 skill points. Congratulations, host. You have received a gold treasure chest. You have completed the territory dungeon mission. You have received 5,000 experience points. All attributes +1. You have killed the giant tiger. Your territory's people's peace of mind +10. Stability +10. You have received a commander's seal archer. You have received a self-created hero creation template. Self-created hero creation template? After hearing the system's notification, Su Len immediately noticed the self-created hero creation template. He opened the storage space and saw a ball the size of a baby's fist that was emitting a faint glow. Su Len moved his mind and took it out of the storage space. It was slightly cold to the touch. The ball of light was light as if it was weightless. It was a little cold to the touch. Self-created hero creation template. After use, an ordinary person can become a hero recognized by the system. After use, the physical fitness will not change. However, after joining the host's camp, experience points will increase and level up. After use, the host can obtain a talent skill and a talent characteristic. The host's original skills and characteristics will not change. Seeing the attributes of the self-created hero creation template, Su Len was obviously happy. This kind of self-created hero creation template existed in the game as well. In the game, other than the basic NPC heroes, players could create other heroes according to their own ideas. He did not expect that this function would be retained after coming to this world. Although the self-created hero template was not strong in terms of attributes, it had one advantage. As long as the experience points reached the level requirement, the character's level would continue to increase without encountering a bottleneck. One had to know that although there were many extraordinary abilities in this world, this kind of ability also depended on one's aptitude. Most people could only stay in the middle and low ranks for their entire lives. Only a few people could break through to the high ranks or even the legendary rank. Now, as long as he had this self-created hero template, he could smoothly rise to the limit without any hindrance. Of course, this thing was not without its drawbacks. After becoming a system-recognized hero, the experience required for each level up would be much higher than the previous one. In the later stages, the experience required to level up would be very high. Therefore, even if one became a hero, it would take a long time to become a legend. However, even though it would take a long time, it was still better than having no hope at all. After putting it away, Su Len took out another token. This was a black token. On one side of the token, there was a drawing of a bow and arrow, and on the other side was a bow. He did not know what material the token was made of. It was as warm as jade in his hand, and it gave him the feeling that it was an old object that had been around for a long time. Commander's Seal Bow. After using it, you can gain the ability to recruit, train, and lead archers. The commander's troop class will be increased to include archers. Su Len chose to use it directly. The drawing of the token in his hand turned into a little light and disappeared into the air. Then, on his information panel, there was an additional troop class called Archer in the commander's column. He put away the severely deformed spear in his hand. This spear was completely scrapped. The only value it had was to be reforged. Su Len reached out and lifted the giant tiger next to him. This 8-meter-long giant tiger could be said to be a treasure from head to toe. One had to know that the meat of a magical beast was not only a very good delicacy, but it also contained special magic. After eating it, it could enhance one's strength. If the corpse of this giant tiger magical beast appeared in the auction house, it would definitely be crazily fought over by the group of nobles. Of course, there was a limit to the strength that the meat of a giant tiger could increase. Other than its meat, its blood was also a good material for making magic ink or some potions. Its fur could be made into enchanted leather armor or magic scrolls. As for its bones, they were also some spellcasting materials or some supplementary ingredients. Of course, there was one thing that could be said to be the favorite of the male nobles. Normal tiger penises were not cheap. The effects of such a high-grade magical beast's penises would definitely be more powerful, so the price would naturally be ridiculously high. As for whether it could be sold, don't doubt the desire of a noble for it. One had to know that men were even more obsessed with it than women were with cosmetics. Such a giant tiger naturally weighed a lot. Su Len estimated that this giant tiger weighed at least 3 to 4 tons. After removing the bones, organs, and fur, there would be at least half of it left. Dragging the giant tiger's corpse out of the forest, he saw a few barbarian warriors from afar. When they saw Sullen's figure appear, they immediately rushed towards him. When they saw what Su Len was dragging, they were so shocked that they could not close their mouths. Head. This is... A strange flush appeared on the faces of the barbarians, and their voices involuntarily trembled. You killed this storm tiger? They could not help but be shocked. Yes. Su Len casually put down the giant tiger's corpse and patted the dust off his body. He said calmly, "I was out patrolling and coincidentally encountered a big cat that ate my cow, so I killed it along the way." "Along the way? All right, stop talking nonsense. Send someone back to the territory to bring the carriage here and bring this thing back." That calm tone made it seem as if he had not killed a high-grade magical beast, but an insignificant ant. The barbarian warriors looked at Su Len with even more admiration. After that, one of them went back to report, while the others worked together to lift the giant tiger's corpse and walk back to the camp. Soon, the barbarian warrior hurried over with a few four-wheeled carriages. Although they already knew that Su Len had killed a storm tiger, they all sucked in a breath of cold air when they saw the enormous creature with their own eyes. When they saw the wounds on the giant tiger's corpse while carrying it, their admiration for Su Len increased by another level. This situation reached a climax when they returned to the camp. When the kobolds and goblins who had been forced to work saw this enormous creature, their bodies involuntarily trembled. This was a fear that was deeply rooted in their bones. The mercenaries and barbarians in the territory were even more honored that their lord had killed such a powerful magical beast. In the north, only a powerful lord could better protect the territory. At this moment, Sullen's reputation in the territory reached a new peak. Chapter 37. The body of the raging wind tiger needed to be dealt with as soon as possible. Although it was a monster, its body would not rot so easily, but the magic in its body would gradually dissipate over time. If it was not dealt with for too long, the effect of the meat would be reduced by more than half. Su Len naturally would not allow this to happen. Therefore, the first thing he did when he returned was to deal with the tiger. At this time, Su Luen suddenly realized that he probably didn't know how to deal with the meat of the magical beasts. Cooking the meat in the ordinary way would cause a large amount of mana in the meat to be lost, so people developed a special way to deal with it. System: Is there a recipe to deal with monster meat? Su Len asked, rubbing his head. There are recipes for sale in the shop. The host can buy them yourself. There's a recipe in the shop? You should have said so earlier. Hearing the system notification, Su Len quickly opened the shop interface and quickly found a recipe to deal with monster materials. He looked at the price, 100 kinner. Sullen's little bit of money was directly emptied out. After buying the formula for the disposal of magical beast materials, Su Luen found that this formula was definitely worth the money. Not only did the formula have various ways to deal with magical beast meat, but it also had other ways to deal with blood, internal organs, bones, and fur. It could be said that it was a comprehensive book on the disposal of magical beast materials. Men. After looking at the recipe, Su Len immediately began to act. "Boss, what are your orders?" A barbarian warrior jogged over and asked. "Go get a few water tanks, fill them with water, and prepare a big pot, the biggest one." The raging wind tiger was heavier than an adult elephant. Although it was not a super large creature, it was still very troublesome to deal with. The blood of the raging wind tiger was a good material, and he needed a glass tank to preserve it. However, Su Len did not have a glass tank, so he planned to use water to make a refrigerator to store the blood. The most valuable parts of the raging wind tiger were its heart, fur, and tiger penis. Sullen's profit from skinning was average, but the barbarians were masters of skinning. As a tribe in the wilderness, they consumed large amounts of prey every day, so they often needed to skin their prey. This allowed them to practice their skinning skills. After seeing the water tank, Sullen's hand emitted a bone-piercing chill. This was one of the ways to control the mystic frost blade. Su Len had figured it out to practice the skill. Su Len manipulated this power and quickly created a refrigerator. Then, the two barbarians took out knives and cut open a wound on the tiger's neck. Blood that contained magic power slowly flowed out. Because the demonic tiger had already died, some of its blood had already stopped circulating. It needed to be continuously patted by humans to expel the blood from its body. In the end, it took 2 full boxes of blood to complete the task. Next was skinning. The two barbarian warriors held sharp skinning knives and carefully cut the tiger's skin. Everyone's cutting speed was very slow. It wasn't that they didn't want to be fast, but that the Fury Wind Tiger's skin was too tough. A skinning knife soon blunted and needed to be polished again. Fortunately, the barbarians had enough chi. After some effort, they finally finished skinning the tiger's skin completely. The tiger's skin was huge. After all, the tiger was 8 meters long. When spread out, it was more than 40 square meters. If this tiger's skin was used to make leather armor, it could easily make 30 pieces. If it was used to make magic scrolls, it could easily make up to 100 pieces. If such a demonic tiger hide were to be auctioned in Cult City, it would fetch at least 3,000 gold coins. If it was made into leather armor and enchanted by an enchantment master, as long as it was successful, the leather armor could easily be sold for thousands of gold coins. Moreover, the tiger skin was a top material for making wizard robes. It would be sold as soon as it appeared. After peeling off the tiger's skin, Su Luan began to cut off the tiger's flesh. He first cut off the tiger's penis and then made an icebox to store it in. This thing could be sold to nobles for at least 5,000 gold coins. Even if he didn't sell it, he could still enjoy it. The tiger's teeth and bones were also removed. The tiger's heart and other organs were all taken out. The tiger's tail was also put away, could be made into a whip. Finally, Su Len separated the tiger's spine, which was more than 7 meters long, and sealed it in ice. The tiger's heart was very big. It was twice the size of a basketball. Even if it was dead, one could still feel the shocking magic waves in the heart. The tiger's heart was the main material for making a magic potion. The most famous one was the Tiger King Awakening Potion. Using this potion could turn a normal person into a sorcerer. Of course, this potion was powerful, but so were the side effects. If one couldn't survive it, their bloodline would collapse and they would die on the spot. If one could survive it, they would awaken as a sorcerer and become a powerful spellcaster. Therefore, although it was dangerous, many people were still willing to try it. A tiger's heart could be used to make 10 bottles of Tiger King Awakening Potion. The price of a tiger's heart wasn't low either. Could be sold for at least 5,000 kinner to wizards. These wizards would then turn it into potions. One bottle could be sold for 5,000 kinner. If all of them were sold, the profit would be at least 10 times. However, this couldn't be helped. Only a few wizards and alchemists could make a small amount of this potion. After cutting up the tiger's meat, Su Len asked the barbarians to start a fire. He then took out all kinds of spices and other food to cook. The fire rose and the water in the iron pot began to boil. Su Len poured the spices he prepared into the iron pot. Then he put the tiger's meat into the pot. Soon, a strange fragrance spread out from the iron pot. Su Len felt his mouth watering. He couldn't help but want to take a bite. Even the barbarians behind him couldn't help but swallow their saliva. Su Len took out a piece of cooked tiger's meat and took a bite. It was tender and smooth. It was delicious. The other barbarians also stared at the meat in Su Len's hand. After eating the tiger's meat in a few bites, Su Len patted his stomach with satisfaction. A warm energy flowed back and forth in his body. It made Su Len feel like his whole body was soaking in a hot spring. It was very comfortable. Okay, eat. Look at you guys. You can't even take a piece of meat. Su Len took a few pieces of tiger's meat and threw it to the barbarians. After getting the meat, the barbarians didn't hold back. They opened their mouths and bit into the meat. Soon, they felt a warm current flowing through their bodies. Su Len looked at the meat. This kind of cooked meat was recognized by the system. P.S. Thank you to Night God Underworld Emperor for the 500 Chidian coins tip. Chapter 38. Magic Tiger Jerky. Made from the meat of a Gale tiger and added a dozen spices. Delicious. Can quickly replenish stamina and slightly increase physique. Has special effects after consumption. Gain +2 strength and +2 dexterity for 2 hours after consumption. Gain +1 strength for the first consumption. Gain +2 strength cumulatively. A Gale tiger like this would make at least 2 tons of jerky. Luckily, Su Len had asked his men to prepare a few big pots. Otherwise, it would take at least a day or two to cook all the meat. Also, the best time to prepare the Gale Tiger meat was 6 hours. If it wasn't done after 6 hours, the remaining meat would go bad, and the effect of the meat would be reduced by a lot. 2 hours later, all the tiger meat had been prepared. The fragrant jerky was piled up into a small hill in the yard. This kind of jerky could be stored for 3 years even if it wasn't specially stored. If it was stored in a special warehouse, it could even be stored for 10 years without a problem. After the jerky was stored in the warehouse, Su Len could finally relax. Apart from the jerky, there were no wizards in the territory who could handle the other materials. He could only wait until he recruited a wizard. As for selling them directly, that was the least profitable option. He gave all the barbarian warriors 3 pieces of jerky and told them to go back and eat. The amount of jerky was just enough to maximize the effect. Eating more would be a waste. After dealing with the storm tiger, Su Luen had time to check the other rewards given by the system. Leveling up had rewarded him with 2 attribute points and 2 skill points. Completing the quest had rewarded him with +1 to all attributes. In addition, eating the storm tiger's meat had increased his strength by 2 points. It could be said that this quest had brought him 9 attribute points so far, which was more than he gained from leveling up 4 times. Su Len added the 2 attribute points to strength. Now his strength had reached 31 points. As for the attribute points, he didn't learn any new skills. Instead, he upgraded his heal skill to physique healing. Physique healing. After use, it can quickly heal more serious injuries. Name: Sullen Race. Human Strength, 31 Dexterity, 29 Will, 24 Vitality, 29 Charm, 19 free attribute points, 0 skill points, 0 skills. Omitted. After testing the effects of physical healing, he found that the effects of physical healing were twice as effective as life healing. However, the consumption of physical healing was the same. After testing the skill, Su Len took out the golden treasure chest from his storage space. Compared to the silver treasure chest, the gold treasure chest had a much more extravagant appearance. It was completely golden in color and gave off a rich aura. After opening the treasure chest, a burst of spiritual light dissipated, and a peculiar banner appeared before him. Congratulations, host! You have obtained the Wind Dragon Flag. Wind Dragon Flag. A magical flag with the ability to control the wind element. The wielder will gain the ability to control the wind element. Additional skills: Wind Elemental Control, Wind Tornado, Wind Dragon Spiral, Lightning Storm, Wind Elemental Control. Able to skillfully control the power of wind elemental energy. Wind elemental affinity increased by 30%. Reduces wind elemental energy consumption by 30%. Wind Tornado. Summons 2 tornadoes made of wind elemental storm to attack the target. Wind Dragon Whirlwind. Summons a portion of the wind elemental storm to form a tornado to attack the target. Lightning Storm. Summons a large amount of wind elemental energy to create a storm within a certain range. Looking at the banner, Su Len was very surprised. This kind of magic item that could release large-scale strategic spells was very rare in the entire human world. It could be said that this item was a great weapon for the countries in this era. Just like the St. Louis Empire, they had the Holy Grail, which was rumored to be able to summon angels. The Lotus Federation in the south also had the Constellation Plate, which could summon a meteor shower. Of course, these strategic magic items could not be used at will. Although Su Len did not know the cost of using these items, it must be very high. He reached out and picked up the Wind Dragon Flag. The entire flag was surrounded by wind elemental energy. When it was swayed slightly, it could move the surrounding elemental energy. As expected, Su Len shook his head with a bitter smile. He felt the Wind Dragon Flag just now. The Wind Dragon Whirlwind was still okay. He could barely use it with his mana. As for the Wind Dragon Whirlwind and Lightning Storm, even if he had twice as much mana, it would still be difficult. According to his estimation, if he wanted to use the Wind Dragon Whirlwind, he would need at least 3 times as much mana. As for the Lightning Storm, he would need even more mana. At least for now, Su Len could not see any hope. Of course, this did not mean that the Wind Dragon Flag was useless. The wind elemental control on the flag could still be used. This was a passive ability. With this, Su Len could now try to cast low-level wind elemental spells. For example, the wind blade that the Gale Tiger released. Su Len could also release it now. It could be said that if this wind dragon flag fell into the hands of a legendary wizard, that wizard's power would be greatly increased. However, in Sullen's hands, it could only be said to be useless. Summon wind blade to cut grass? The power of the wind blade was not even as strong as his long spear. At least the energy used to wield the weapon would be replenished in a short while, but the mana used to summon the wind blade would take some time to recover. Holding the wind dragon flag, Su Luen summoned 2 wind elementals. The 2 wind elementals were small wind elementals about 1.5 meters tall. They looked like 2 small tornadoes with a few lightning bolts inside. This kind of wind elementals had very low intelligence, so Su Luen could command and control them at will with the power of the wind dragon flag. Although the 2 wind elementals had low combat power, they were masters at cleaning. They floated in the air like powerful vacuum cleaners. With a whoosh, the trash, dust, and grass on the ground were brought to the trash bin by the wind elementals. They even provided the service of cutting grass. After a whirlwind blew by, even the grass was cleaned up. From that day onwards, Su Len had 2 more automatic smart vacuum cleaners. He also named the 2 wind elementals Vacuum Cleaner 1 and Vacuum Cleaner 2. After that, the territory finally ushered in a period of peace. The number of goblins and kobold tribes in the territory decreased because of the barbarians' regular patrols. Su Len continued to bring the slaves to reclaim the land in the camp to plant potatoes. There was still a shortage of food in the territory. Su Luen's plan was to cultivate at least 5,000 mu of land, all of which would be planted with potatoes. The potatoes would mature in 3 to 4 months. When the first batch of potatoes was ripe, it would almost snow here. Unlike the south, the north had long winters. Only when the potatoes matured would there be enough food in the territory. Chapter 39. The weather was still hot after autumn. In the wilderness outside the territory, thousands of goblins, kobolds, and gnolls were repairing the earth under the sun. There were also dozens of supervisors of different races standing next to them. Whenever they saw someone slacking off, they would immediately whip them. Su Luen was lying leisurely on a recliner under a big tree, wearing a pair of black crystal sunglasses on the bridge of his nose. There was a glass of freshly squeezed juice on the small table next to him. Behind him, Vacuum Cleaner number 1 and Vacuum Cleaner number 2 were like 2 small fans with great power, blowing the wind with a whooshing sound. In this autumn sun, they brought a gust of cool breeze. On the other side of the field that had already been cultivated, a group of strong women and children were driving the cows to plow the field. On the other side of the city wall, there was fertile black soil on the banks of the Red Sand River. About 2,000 acres of land had already been cultivated. According to the current progress, it would take at most half a month to cultivate all 5,000 acres of potatoes. Ding! The construction of the barracks field is complete. Importing data. Importing the militia training content. Importing the infantry training content. Importing the archer training content. Data importing progress 10%, 20%, 30%. Su Luen was slightly taken aback by the sudden sound of the system notification. The barracks field was already completed? Su Len quickly opened the system interface to check. Barracks drill ground. The barracks drill ground trains qualified soldiers for the territory. Every soldier trained here is a qualified warrior. They are important personnel in the defense of the territory and have undergone rigorous military training. They only need to go through a period of training to become elite soldiers. Soldiers are the foundation of a lord's rule. Weapon proficiency +2, training time reduced by 20%, discipline +2, morale +15, territory stability +15. Looking at the barracks attributes, Su Len was secretly happy. With the barracks, he could continue to train qualified soldiers. Of course, the prerequisite was that he had enough money and territory. Training soldiers required money. Currently, the barracks in the territory could only train 3 types of soldiers. One was the barbarian soldiers, the other was the spearmen, and the last was the archer. Among them, the lancers were the least expensive, with only 1 kinner. The barbarians required 3 kinner, and the archers required 2 kinner. As for cavalry, crossbowmen, and heavy infantry, they were all unlocked. The easiest way to unlock these troop classes was to obtain the corresponding troop class's commander's seal. If there was no commander's seal, then recruit a hero who could train this troop class. Of course, they could only recruit ordinary soldiers. As for those special soldiers, they needed a commander's seal to train them. Su Len also wanted to form a powerful knight order, but based on the current situation, this goal was still very far away. They arrived at the military camp, which was located on the west side of the territory outside the city wall. The city wall that Su Len was currently building was actually the inner city of the city. When the territory population increased next year, the outer city and outer city walls would be officially built. The inner city of Su Len was prepared to be his private land. The area of the military camp was not small. It was divided into barracks, warehouses, training grounds, and drill grounds. The training grounds and drill grounds took up 70% of the total area of the military camp. Currently, there were only some archery targets and straw dummies in the training grounds. There were also some training weapons and equipment. An army formed by newly recruited freedmen would not be recognized by the system. Only those who were strong would be recognized, such as the barbarians. When freedmen formed an army, they would still be considered commoners, and only after a period of training could they become militia. But once they had a military camp and went through the training, they would directly skip the militia and become new soldiers. Although the military camp was successfully built, Su Len did not recruit soldiers. The territory's population was too small. Other than the barbarians, there were only mercenaries. If he wanted to train soldiers, he would have to wait for the slaves that Xian brought back from Cult City. After inspecting the military camp, Su Len did not go back to rest. Instead, he went to the smithy. In the last battle with the Storm Tiger, his weapon was damaged. Now he needed a new one. Because he was very strong, his weapon had to be sturdy and durable. Take the spear, for example. A spear made of ironwood was too light in his hands. Therefore, he used an iron spear. However, even an iron spear could not withstand his destruction. As for why he did not use other weapons, it was because the spear was cool. Actually, it was because of the system's template. Only by using a spear could he unleash the greatest power. As for the luck of the spearman, Su Len did not feel it at all. In fact, his luck was not bad. After all, he had inherited Big Brother Yun's template. How did the saying go again? The world spearman had a stone of luck. Zilong alone had 12 stones, while the rest of the spearmen had 2 stones. Su Len now had 12 stones of luck. The spearman's luck was based on facts. Looking through historical records and classical works, he realized that most of the spearmen in history did not have good endings. The Marquis of Huayin, Han Xian, was conferred the title of Marquis. He received an imperial edict but was ignored by heaven and earth. In the end, he was beaten to death. The little conqueror, Sun Tzu, was ambushed by a few thieves. He was seriously injured and died of an illness. In the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, he was cursed to death by the demon Yuji. The 5-tiger general, Ma Chao, died of an illness in his prime. The 5-tiger general, Zhang Fei, was stabbed in the back by his subordinates. His head was chopped off while he was sleeping. In the Romance of the Sui and Tang dynasties, Luo Cheng fell into a trap and was pierced through the heart by thousands of arrows. The Yang family of Skywave Prefecture, the Yang family spearmanship was unparalleled in the world. However, almost no one in the family had a good ending. The leopard head, Lin Chong, was exhausted and his wife and children were separated. In the end, he died of humiliation in the 6 Harmonies Pagoda. Su Ning, the leader of the first group of people to worship heaven on the way to Liangshan Lake. The national hero, Yu Fei, was killed by Wanyan Go and Qin Hui. These living examples told us that the spearman's luck was really low. Looking at Zhao Zilong, who had fought countless battles in his life and lived for more than 80 years without any illness or disaster, his ending was much better than theirs. It was a miracle that he could save his master alone. 42 years of life, Zilong has shown his prowess. Therefore, Big Brother Yun's luck was based on history. If he wanted to forge a weapon for himself, he naturally had to use the best materials possible. The best material in the blacksmith shop was the tempered iron essence. In addition to the tempered iron essence, Su Len also took out the 2 pieces of iron essence that were rewarded by the system. These 2 pieces of iron essence were much better than the tempered iron essence in the blacksmith shop. If not for the fact that he did not have enough iron essence to forge a spear, Su Len would have used all of it. Now, he could only use a mixture of tempered iron essence. Chapter 40. Bruce's craftsmanship could only be considered decent. There was still a gap between him and a true master, not to mention the dwarves. However, Su Len didn't expect him to make a divine weapon for him. He only wanted it to be sturdy and durable. None of the enemies he'd encountered so far had made him feel threatened. After a day of forging, Sullen's new weapon was completed. Steel Spear, a superior weapon forged with steel as the main material. Sturdy, durable, and sharp. Armor penetration +1, sturdiness +1, sharpness +1. Su Len shook the spear. The entire spear was made of metal, so it weighed more than 40 kilograms. It was already considered a heavy weapon, and it was more than 3 meters long. Without great strength, it was impossible to wield this weapon. After the rain, the wilderness plains welcomed the bright and beautiful sun. A group of spotted antelopes were eating grass with their heads lowered. Only the leader of the antelope kept turning its head back and forth, paying attention to any movement in the wind or grass. It seemed that it would immediately warn the herd to flee if it noticed anything wrong. Su Len stood downwind and observed the group of antelopes. Antelopes were very alert animals. There would always be a sentinel keeping watch at all times. This was also how they could reproduce and survive in the wilderness. Antelopes usually lived in groups of a dozen to a few dozen. These antelopes were good at running and were very difficult to catch. At the very least, horses and hunting dogs couldn't catch up to them. Goblins and kobolds couldn't even catch up. The best way to catch an antelope was to ambush and surround it. At this moment, 30 barbarians had formed an encirclement around the group of antelopes within a 1-kilometer radius. Before the group of antelopes noticed, the encirclement started to shrink. The antelopes didn't notice the approaching danger and continued to nibble on the grass. A few 3-month-old baby antelopes were playing around their mother. At this moment, the sentinel's head suddenly stopped moving. His body seemed to be preparing to leap up. The barbarians hiding in the grass felt their hearts tighten. "Move!" With a loud roar, he leapt up from the bushes. The barbarians hidden in the bushes around him leapt out and quickly charged towards the antelope in the middle. The herd of spotted antelopes instantly panicked. More than 10 spotted antelopes ran in all directions in panic, but against the hunter who had already completed his task, their fate was self-evident. A few minutes later, more than 30 barbarians came to Su Luan's place with their prey in high spirits. "Boss, we caught them all. Not a single one escaped." "Are the females and lambs injured?" Su Len asked. He planned to try to raise the spotted antelopes in his territory. "Boss, since you've instructed us, we'll definitely be careful. Those you and the little spotted antelope are fine." A barbarian raised the spotted antelope in his hand and said, "That's good. Let's go back to Sword's Gate and eat a whole roasted lamb today," Su Len said as he led the barbarians back to the campsite. Next was boiling water, slaughtering the antelope, letting out the blood and skinning it. Su Len purposely kept the blood for tonight's hot pot. A few barbarians deftly cut open the antelope's stomach and cut it into pieces. They didn't throw away the organs either. These were the real treasures. After washing and skinning them clean, they directly put them into the hot pot to cook. Su Len purposely asked Bruce to melt the bronze weapons and make 2 bronze hot pots. He hadn't had a hot pot for so long in the wilderness. Now that the territory had stabilized, Su Len couldn't hold back his hunger any longer. The soup base of the hot pot was boiled with butter, chili pepper, and other spices. The soup stock was also boiled with beef bones. Although the conditions were a little simple, the soup boiled with bison bones was too fragrant. The beef bones had been simmered for a day, and the oil in the bone marrow had been stewed out. Sulen ate the mutton hot pot to his heart's content. After coming to the northern wilderness for so long, he ate potato fish or potato fried fish every day. No matter how delicious the fish soup was, he would throw up if he ate it for 1 or 2 months. He almost wanted to look up at the stars. Now that he had a delicious mutton hot pot, it was simply too blissful. Because of the food shortage, Sulen took the barbarians to hunt in the wilderness. Although the wilderness looked barren, there were still many different kinds of animals. After a period of hunting, the hunting team's harvest was very rich. In order to store the prey, Sulen specially ordered the slaves to build a livestock pen next to the city wall. Now there were more than 100 different kinds of animals in the pen. There were more than 20 spotted antelopes, and the most were the giant antelopes. These giant antelopes migrated from here some time ago, and he and the barbarian hunters caught hundreds of them. If it wasn't because he was worried that the giant antelopes wouldn't pass through here in the future, Sulen was ready to cook them with a ladle. The construction of the territory was still ongoing, but the most important buildings had already been completed. Most of them were civilian houses. The houses he was building this time could house up to 1,000 people. Even the 500 slaves that Zion and Johnson brought back would have a place to live. However, Sulen's own lord's castle was now almost finished. Of course, it was simplified. If it was built according to his ideal, it wouldn't be finished at all in a year and a half. As for the temple in the territory, Sulen didn't build it at all. Temples were necessary in the St. Louis Empire. Every city had a temple, and even the villages had a church. After all, the church was an international power, and the power of the church was unprecedentedly strong there. The Kingdom of Florence was a multi-faith country. There were temples in the cities, but the power of religion was not strong. Even if Sulen built a temple in this godforsaken territory, there probably wouldn't be any priests here. The temple had its advantages. At least the healing divinity of a temple priest was very good. And from the beginning, he didn't plan to build a temple. It was too expensive. The best material to build a temple was marble, but where could he find marble in the northern wilderness? A temple occupied a large area and was generally built in the prosperous areas of the city. In such a place where every inch of land was worth gold, Sulen didn't want to give it to a temple for free. Wouldn't it be better to build a business street or sell it as a shop? Of course, if his territory developed, there would definitely be churches coming to build temples. At that time, it would depend on the negotiation between the two sides. After the important buildings in the territory were finished, Sulen directed the construction of drainage projects in the town, including the public toilets and public baths in the future town. Chapter 41. In the past, the barbarians did not pay attention to personal hygiene. Later, Sulen forced them to do so. Barbarians usually had long hair, and some of them even had braids. However, these guys were too lazy and couldn't be bothered to take care of their hair. Therefore, their hair was often dirty, and there were even many lice in it. The smell on their bodies was also suffocating. Sulen ordered the goblin slaves to dig a large hole and sprinkled lime in it. He then directed the water from the Red Sand River into the hole, and personally threw all the barbarians into it. They were not allowed to come out until they were soaked in it for half an hour. After a series of forced measures, Sulen finally taught the barbarians how to be hygienic. Many of the barbarians were too lazy to take care of their hair, and they were afraid that Sulen would teach them a lesson. In the end, they shaved all their hair. As a result, except for the female barbarians in the camp, 8 out of 10 male barbarians were bald. All the barbarian warriors were bald. Now, his barbarian guards were all bald and muscular. They looked very intimidating. During the hunt, the barbarian hunters accidentally caught a few wild horses. Sulen tried to train the wild horses, but these wild horses were difficult to train. Sulen did not have a qualified trainer. Some of the mercenaries knew how to ride horses, but they were not very good at it. Sulen did not want to give up on the cavalry, but he did not have any suitable candidates. In the end, he could only build a stable for the wild horses to live in. Perhaps in the coming year, there would be a few more foals in the stable. Because of the archer's seal, Su Len could train the archers. The shooting range in the camp had also been built. At the moment, the territory needed a group of archers to increase their long-range damage. Aside from the factor of the archer, the factor of the weapon also accounted for a large proportion. It was not easy to make a good bow. From the selection of materials to the production process, it was very complicated. There were also many materials. For example, the bow body of the bow needed to be selected from the best wood. Even the production process had to be adapted to the seasons. The wood was dissected in the winter, the horn was boiled in the spring, and the tendon was treated in the summer. In the autumn, the wood, horn, and tendon were combined with glue, lacquer, and silk. Finally, the body of the bow was fixed in the coldest season of winter. Therefore, it would take at least 2 years to make a good bow. Su Len couldn't wait that long, so he decided to make some bows and arrows first. After a while, he would see if there was a chance to trade for some centaur longbows with the centaur tribe. Due to the short amount of time, the bows and arrows made by the blacksmith shop had a smaller range and power. However, it could also be used for training purposes. The archers were selected from the mercenaries. Although the strength of these mercenaries was average, they had used all kinds of weapons. Su Len gave them the shooting range in the barracks for practice. There was a lot of red sand in the Red Sand River, which was why Su Len named the river. The sand was very fine, and it was very useful for laying a training ground. The barbarians were all energetic guys. When they didn't have a mission, they would often spar and wrestle. After the construction of the barracks training ground was completed, these barbarians were happy. They liked to fight on the training ground when they had nothing to do. Now, the training ground was almost turned into a gladiator arena. Because the territory lacked entertainment facilities, the barbarian gladiators were very popular in the camp. Su Len let them be. Most of the trees in the northern wastelands were pinewood. Pinewood was not the best wood for making bows and arrows because of its average toughness. The Kingdom of Florence most commonly used oak or teak to make bows and arrows. After these woods were air-dried, the bows made were tough and not easily deformed. The range was also long. It was the standard equipment of the kingdom's army. Of course, although the Kingdom of Florence's bows and arrows were good, they were still lacking compared to the centaurs and half-elves. The effective range of the Florence's standard longbow was only about 100 meters. Some excellent archers could hit the target at 120 meters. The effective range of the centaur's bows and arrows was 150 meters or even 200 meters. The same was true for the half-elves. In addition to their superior bow-making skills, there was also the material of the bows and arrows. The centaur's longbows were made of purple fir wood, coupled with their unique bow-making skills. As for the bows used by the half-elves, it seemed to be a special plant that they cultivated. Purple fir wood was expensive and could only be found in the depths of the northern wastelands. The wood was tough, elastic, and malleable. The amount of purple fir wood that the Kingdom of Florence obtained every year was very small. Most of it was obtained from the centaur tribe. It was not easy for Su Len to obtain this kind of wood unless he also crossed the wilderness and went further north to look for it. It was not that humans had never thought of transplanting purple fir wood. With the help of the wizards, humans successfully transplanted and grew a batch of yew trees. However, after transplanting to the human kingdom, the quality of the purple fir wood declined greatly. Compared to the purple fir wood of the centaurs, the wood was 1/3 softer. It was not even comparable to oak or teak. The cost was higher than teak and oak, but the quality was almost the same. As a result, the purple fir wood was quickly forgotten in the corner. Su Len wanted to develop archers, so it was necessary to find a suitable wood. As for oak and teak, these trees liked warmer climates. His territory was too far north. Whether it was oak or teak, they would freeze to death in the long northern winter. Of course, if Su Len had enough money, he could also buy it directly from the system store. Since the establishment of the blacksmith shop, the system store sold a variety of weapons, but the weapons in the store were too expensive. A barbarian two-handed axe cost 150 kinner. He asked the blacksmith shop to make one for him, and the cost was only 20 kinner. A short bow cost 40 kinner, and a long bow directly cost 100 kinner. Sulen was now so poor that he could not get 100 kinner. It could be said that he was now the poorest lord in the whole kingdom of Florence. Naturally, Sulen could not afford such a price. Although there were many things in the territory, it still made him very happy to see the territory change day by day. Just this afternoon, Zion and Johnson returned to the territory with more than 500 slaves and 20 carts of food. The return of the caravan instantly multiplied the population of Sulen's territory. A sufficient population was the foundation of a territory's development. Now the number of humans in Sulen's territory had reached more than 700. Although the population was still small, as long as they survived this difficult period, the territory would develop rapidly. Chapter 42. With the addition of 500 human slaves, Sulen's manpower was no longer as tight. All 500 slaves were sent to farm. This time, Sulen did not plan to only farm 500 acres of land. He wanted to farm as much land as possible. With the return of the caravan, the camp became livelier. The 20 carriages also brought back a lot of supplies. After all, furs were very popular in the northern wilderness. With the return of the caravan, Sulen temporarily put aside looking for suitable materials to make bows and arrows. He focused on developing his territory again. With a large increase in the population, the territory became more prosperous. 10 days after Owen's caravan left, they passed by Sulen's territory again. However, because of the barbarians' escape last time, Owen directly went to Sulen to ask for compensation. However, Sulen did not admit that he was the one who let the barbarians escape. He even claimed that the barbarians who escaped were not with him. In order to prove his innocence, Sulen asked Owen to personally check his barbarian guards. Of course, he did not find anything. In the end, Owen could only leave with a sullen expression. Sulen noticed that Owen's caravan had many longbows. The longbows were 1.8 meters long and had a purple body. They were centaur longbows. There were at least 50 of them. It seemed that Owen had a good harvest this time. These centaur longbows could be sold for at least 3,000 gold coins in the human kingdom. They were also priceless. They would be bought as soon as they appeared. An archer squad made up of centaur longbows was definitely the nightmare of any attacker. Unfortunately, he did not have the money to buy them. Sulen suppressed his desire to rob with an unusually strong will. He arranged for people to send Owen's caravan away. As the days passed, the territory continued to change. The appearance of a new territory would naturally occupy the living space of the original wasteland races. It was also a threat to the surrounding wasteland races. After defeating the middle-sized Knoll tribe, the territory gained a temporary peace. However, this peace would not last long. The strong intervention of humans was like a baby crocodile in a small fish pond. Although it was still young, once this crocodile grew up, the whole fish pond would be eaten clean by it. Faced with the pressure of the humans, and after a month of chaos, the surrounding tribes finally came to an agreement. They formed a powerful army to drive the humans out of the wastelands. The remaining 2 Knoll tribes, as well as a larger number of goblins and kobolds, were preparing to form a powerful allied army. The law of survival in the wilderness was always the law of the jungle. It was rare for several tribes to band together. Only when they felt a common sense of danger would they choose to band together. After the last battle, Sulen restored the beacon towers in his territory and added a few more. He also paid close attention to the movements around his territory. Forer was a goblin. To be precise, he was the leader of a small goblin tribe. When Sulen led the barbarians to clean up the wasteland, their entire tribe was captured and enslaved. What was unbelievable was that the leader of the goblin tribe, Forer, had learned the human language. Although he stuttered and spoke with a strange accent, he had successfully learned the human language. After learning the human language, Forer volunteered to be Sulen's interpreter. He believed that there was nothing wrong with being Sulen's slave. At least Sulen would give them food so that they would not starve. The goblins in the wasteland were often enslaved by various powerful tribes. The trolls, gnolls, lizardmen, and many others would enslave the goblins. Under the enslavement of these tribes, the goblins were used as cannon fodder or as food reserves. In comparison, being a slave in the human territory was like heaven. Although they would still be whipped, at least they would not be killed. Moreover, they would be given food if they worked hard. Although the food given to them was pitiful, it was better than starving. Although Sulen had been in this world for 10 years, he still retained many values from his previous life. Of course, he did not try to challenge the traditions of this world. He was against slavery, against the exploitation of nobles, against religious oppression, and so on. As an adult with vested interests, he would not risk universal condemnation to liberate the slaves. However, he would not be like the people of this era who would oppress the slaves cruelly. For example, as long as the goblins and Houndhead men did not resist, Sulen would not simply kill them. The slaves would work and provide them with food. Of course, that was all. However, the goblin leader, Forer, felt that this was a blessing. The goblin leader told the other goblins about the benefits of being Sulen's slave and promoted Sulen's benevolence. What surprised him more was that the system recognized this goblin called Forer. Goblin slave, Forer, goblin leader, master, Sulen, loyalty, 100. Most of the former goblin lords were foolish, but there were always one or two exceptions. As a smart one among the goblins, he learned the human language with his own efforts. In order to have enough food and clothes, he chose to pledge his loyalty to the humans. With his identity, he easily gained the trust of the goblins. Skills: observation +2, goblin affinity +20. With this goblin slave, the goblin slaves became more docile. Sulen put all the goblin supervisors under his command and the goblins' efficiency increased again. And those goblin supervisors had actually become soldiers recognized by the system. Goblin supervisor, the strongest among the goblins. In order to have a better life, these goblins chose to pledge their loyalty to the human lord. Strength: 4, vitality, 3, agility, 5, spirit, 3, charm, 3, skills. Lash, observation. Although their combat power is not as good as the 5 weaklings, they still have their own uses. After Sulen discovered this situation, other than ordering the goblins to work, he also sent them to the wilderness to gather information about the tribes. Due to their identity as goblins, they naturally gained the recognition of the tribes in the wilderness. They easily blended into the tribes and eavesdropped on the news for Sulen. For these undisciplined tribes in the wilderness, one more goblin slave or one less goblin slave would not even be noticed. With the information provided by the goblin slaves, Sulen finally had a more accurate understanding of the tribes around his territory. Chapter 43. You're saying that the tribes have formed an alliance to attack my territory? Sulen was not too surprised to hear the news from Forer. Yes, master, Forer said respectfully as he lay on the ground. Get up. If it's true, you've done a great job. Sulen put the piece of wood on the table. Thank you, master, Forer said excitedly. He even wanted to kiss Sulen's boots. Johnson, send a few people to scout the territory. See if the gnolls, goblins, and kobolds have gathered. Yes, boss. I'll go arrange it right away, Johnson said as he turned around and left. After the arrangements were made, Sulen began to gather the rest of the barbarian guards. Everyone's vacation was cancelled. Sulen even gave the remaining women and children weapons. Although the women and children were women and children, they were not weak at all. If it weren't for the childish look on their faces, it wouldn't be a problem to call them adults. As barbarians, even though they were still underage, their physiques were no weaker than the average Florentine citizen. They might even be stronger. Sulen did not plan to let the women and children fight. He gave them weapons so that they could maintain order and defend the city. Sulen did not plan to passively defend. This territory had just been developed. If the gnolls, kobolds, and goblins were allowed to attack, The newly developed farmlands outside the territory would be destroyed. The blacksmith shop by the river would also be destroyed. This was unacceptable to Su Len. He had invested thousands of kinner and spent so much time on it. If it was destroyed, he would go crazy. The blacksmith shop had made many weapons recently. After the scrap metal was melted down and recast, it had become refined iron. The quality of the weapons made with the refined iron was excellent. There was a half-body armor, a two-handed axe, a horn helmet, a pair of boots, a skirt armor, and 3 hand axes. This was the standard equipment of the barbarian guards. If one were to buy it in Cult, it would cost at least 300 kinner. The most expensive one was the half-body armor. It was made of refined iron and cost at least 150 kinner. This set of equipment weighed at least 100 pounds. Normal people would find it difficult to walk with it, but the barbarians could still walk as if they were flying. It was as if they were wearing leather armor instead of iron. Over 30 barbarian warriors in metal armor and holding sharp axes stood together. Even the weakest of them was over 2 meters tall, and an invisible aura of killing intent washed over them. A timid person would probably be scared to death by these war machines. Other than these barbarian guards, Su Len had only prepared some axes and spears. Their armor was also some leather armor, and at most only metal plates were embedded in their vital parts. There were not many leather armors, and most of them were replaced by barbarian guards. Although the mercenaries had joined the territory as free citizens, they would still pick up their weapons when the territory was in danger. They were considered veterans. Although their strength was average, they were still capable of staying behind to guard the territory. The 500 serfs all retreated to the city to hide. Su Len had spent 1,500 kinner to buy these serfs. They were to be used as farmers in the territory. He did not plan to let these serfs fight. Even if they picked up their weapons, they would be nothing more than food to the goblins and kobolds. The 1,000 goblins, kobolds, and gnolls were locked up to prevent them from causing trouble when Su Len was not around. After everything was arranged, it was already evening. Su Len brought the barbarian guards back to the Lord's castle for dinner. When Xion and Johnson went back to buy slaves last time, Su Len specifically asked him to bring back a chef from Cult. After a few days of training by Su Len, this chef could now cook food that suited his taste. Johnson took a bite of the wheat flour pancake. The wheat flour used to make white bread was baked into a pancake, and he rolled it up with a roll of roast duck meat. It conquered his taste buds instantly, and he devoured the pancake in a few bites. "Boss, this roast duck roll is amazing." Su Len did not pay attention to this glutton. He picked up a piece of boiled mutton with his chopsticks and ate happily. "Did the scouts come back?" "They're back." Johnson ate the rest of the roll in one bite. "What's the situation like?" Su Len saw Johnson eating so happily, and couldn't help but grab a roll and roll some roast duck. He rolled it up and took a big bite. "Those tribes are still fighting for dominance." Johnson sneered. "Those tribes in the wilderness are all bandits. It's not easy to get them to listen to you. None of them are willing to suffer losses. If they want to unite, they won't succeed without a few internal fights. They really are a bunch of mobs," Su Len said. "How many of them are there?" "The camp is too messy. I can't calculate how many of them there are, but I estimate at least 5,000. Johnson picked up another roll and took a bite. 5,000? These trash are looking down on us too much. Do they really think they can win with numbers? Su Len laughed disdainfully. But we can't be careless. A lion will go all out to catch a rabbit, not to mention a war. Be careful. My lord is wise. Johnson flattered. It's good that they're working together. It saves me the trouble of looking for them one by one. This time we can deal with them all at once. It saves me a lot of trouble, Su Len said as he took a sip of ale. By the way, do you remember where the tribe's allied forces are? Of course. I asked Forer to bring 2 goblins to keep an eye on them. That's good. Su Len nodded and continued eating. Let's go after dinner. After dinner, Su Len left the camp with his barbarian guards under the cover of the night. It was still cold in the wilderness at night. Len tightened his clothes. Those damn tribes in the wilderness. They should have just stayed put. Why did they have to come looking for trouble? Now I have to travel in the middle of the night. Len was in a bad mood. As a noble with a territory, he couldn't sleep on a thick velvet bed at night. There were no pretty maids to warm his bed, and he had to travel with a group of rough men. He was in a bad mood. There was no velvet bed, no pretty maids to warm his bed. There were only 35 muscular bald men who were more than 2 meters tall. Warm his bed? Unless you wanted to have a taste of being covered by them. Chapter 44. Under the starlight in the sky, the group hurried through the wilderness. The camp of the tribes was to the east of Sullen's territory. It was more than 80 miles away from Sullen's camp. According to the Knoll's speed, it would take them 2 days to arrive if they attacked Sullen's territory. However, for the barbarians and Len, they could arrive in 3 hours if they traveled with light equipment. To save energy, Len brought a few carriages to transport the armor. Everyone carried their own weapons. Other than weapons, the carriages were also loaded with large amounts of pine wood. Pine wood could be found everywhere in the wilderness. This plant liked to grow in cold areas because of the high oil content in its trunk. It was very suitable for making torches. It was a must-have for traveling, killing, and robbing. There were many nocturnal animals in the wilderness. However, when they saw Sullen's group, they all ran away. The group traveled for 6 hours in the wilderness. Finally, at 2 o'clock in the morning, they arrived 3 miles away from the camp of the tribes. "Master, you're finally here." A figure quickly rushed over and jumped at Sullen's feet. It was 4. "Get up. What's the situation at the camp of the tribes?" Len asked. "Master, there was a disturbance at the camp in the evening. The Knolls from 2 tribes were fighting for food." "What's the situation now?" "They're resting in the camp." Len nodded. It was 2 o'clock in the morning. People were sleeping soundly. He let the barbarian guards rest here while he and 4 sneaked toward the camp of the tribes. Luen hid in a tree outside the encampment and secretly observed. The encampment of the allied forces of tribes was very simple and messy. It could even be said that the encampment set up by a rookie was better than this one. What made Len even more speechless was that no one was keeping watch at night in such a big camp. No, the goblins and kobolds who were keeping watch were already asleep. Len could still hear the snoring of the goblin from more than 10 meters away. After observing outside the camp for half an hour, Luen left with 4 and returned to their temporary stronghold. After a long night's journey, as the most elite barbarian guards, they had recovered. "Everyone, put on your equipment. The battle is about to begin," Len said as he took out a spear from his storage space. The 35 barbarian warriors immediately got into action, donning their armor. In less than 5 minutes, everyone was ready to go. The barbarian warriors in full armor began their slaughter. "Boss, I'm ready. Give me the order," Johnson said eagerly as he stroked the shiny blade of his axe. Flames danced in his eyes. "That's right, boss. We can't wait any longer. My axe is thirsty for blood. This time, I must kill to my heart's content." The barbarian warriors all asked to fight. "What's the hurry?" Len slapped Johnson to the side. "There are only 36 of us. There are at least 5,000 kobolds, goblins, gnolls, and trolls in the camp. If we charge in like this, how many can you kill? You won't even be able to kill all of them. Use your brains." "Boss, are we going to run after 1 kill?" Johnson asked carefully. "Idiot." Len looked at him and said, "Do you see those torches? Take a few each. After we enter, don't fight. Use the torches to light up the entire camp." "Understood. Boss, take the things. We're going to start now." Len looked at the huge camp a few kilometers away. "The barbecue party has begun. I hope you like it." It was very quiet in the wilderness at night. Occasionally, there would be the sound of the northern wind whistling. The temperature was very low at night. Even the goblins and kobolds on night watch had hidden in a corner to sleep. At this moment, A rustling sound came from the dark bushes outside the camp. Soon, black figures emerged from the darkness one after another. These black figures were over 2 meters tall and wore heavy armor. The giant axes in their hands gleamed coldly. They were all silent, like a group of demons that had crawled out from the abyss. "Light the torches and charge with me." The torches made of pine wood were very easy to burn. After a few seconds, a ball of orange flame suddenly rose from the top of the candle. As it burned, it made crackling sounds. The air was filled with the smell of pine. All 36 torches were lit. Then, Su Len gave the order and led the barbarian guards to form a conical formation and charge toward the camp. Wearing weapons and equipment that weighed hundreds of pounds, the 30-odd barbarians ran with an aura that could topple mountains and overturn seas. The heavy footsteps woke up the goblins and kobolds on night watch. After discovering the enemy, these cannon fodder shouted and wanted to escape, but it was already too late. These tribes in the wilderness did not expect Su Len to sneak in and attack at night. The defense of the camp was also arranged casually by the unlucky ones. In the end, the relaxed camp was easily breached. Su Len rushed to the gate of the camp and waved the long spear in his hand. He smashed the gate of the camp into pieces. The 30-odd barbarians followed closely behind. Everywhere they went, there were corpses everywhere. According to Sullen's orders, the group did not fight with these monsters. After charging into the camp, the barbarians started to set fire crazily. The camp of the allied tribes quickly turned into a sea of fire. The construction of the camp was very simple and messy. More and more flames started to burn. The tents were covered with a lot of oil because they were waterproof. A few small flames would ignite the entire tent. In addition, the allied tribes did not clean up the weeds in the camp, so the sparks easily ignited the withered grass. Soon, the fire grew bigger and bigger. Faced with this situation, many goblins and kobolds began to run in all directions. Their escape led more goblins and kobolds to follow. These tribes in the wilderness were already problematic in the first place. After the chaos, the leaders of the tribes could not control their own armies. Some gnolls wanted to gather together, but the barbarian warriors took out their axes and threw them, splitting their heads in half. As for the monsters that did not resist, they did not kill them. Instead, they chased them from behind and let them run in all directions to create chaos. Those that dared to resist were all killed in the shortest amount of time. This was to give these tribes the greatest fear. If they ran, they had a chance to live. If they resisted, they would die. Originally, the army of these tribes was undisciplined, a motley crew. After the sudden night attack, they became even more disorderly. Chapter 45. The night was filled with flames and the sounds of fighting. The tribes had no idea how many enemies there were. Some took advantage of the chaos to retaliate. Although the tribes had formed an alliance, it didn't mean that they were harmonious. On the contrary, there was a lot of discord between the tribes. Taking advantage of the chaos, they directly attacked their old enemies. For a time, the camp was in chaos. The sounds of fighting were everywhere. Su Len and the barbarian warriors formed a cone formation that was like a sharp blade, stirring up the entire camp. As soon as the tribes showed signs of gathering, Su Len would directly disperse and kill them. Faced with such a situation, the goblins and kobolds, who could only fight with the wind, had already started to run. The goblins, on the other hand, were still trying to gather together and counterattack. But as soon as they gathered, they were crushed by Su Len and the barbarian warriors before they could even form a formation. The fully equipped barbarian guards were like high-speed heavy tanks, breaking through all the obstacles in front of them. The sharp two-handed axes were constantly swinging, one after another. The barbarians were like highly efficient harvesters, cutting rows of enemies in half. The fully equipped barbarian guards carried more than 100 pounds of weight. As they charged, they were completely invincible. The equipment that could crush ordinary people didn't seem cumbersome at all. No matter if it was the goblins or the gnolls, everyone was equal in front of the giant axes. This group of barbarian warriors with horned helmets were like demons walking out of hell. Blood soaked their armor, leaving a path of flesh and blood behind them. Although Su Len and the others charged quickly, the camp of the allied tribes was too big. A team of 36 people was still too small. Although Su Len was charging on the battlefield as fast as he could, there were still some gnolls and goblins who managed to gather together. The heavy spear in Sullen's hand flew up and down. The shrill sound of the spear breaking through the air could be heard even in the chaotic battlefield. Rows of enemies were directly swept away. Those broken bodies were obviously not going to survive. Just as he kept moving forward, he suddenly felt the weight on the spear suddenly decrease. He turned around and saw that there were no enemies standing around. In front of him, there was a vacuum in the chaotic battlefield. Across the empty space, a majestic gnoll more than 2.5 meters tall was fiercely staring at him. This gnoll was holding a flail. The handle of the flail was about 1/2 meter long. On the other end of the chain was a 1/2 meter long chain. The other end of the chain was connected to an iron ball the size of a human head. The iron ball was covered with sharp spikes. At this time it was full of red flesh and blood. At first glance it was frightening. Unlike the other gnolls, this gnoll was wearing a set of fine iron armor. There were hundreds of gnolls around him. Similarly, these gnolls were also wearing armor. The gnoll's armor looked simple and cumbersome. Most of the armor was made up of individual parts, such as spiked pauldrons, heavy breastplates, and rough and cumbersome wrist guards. These pieces of equipment were obviously cast. Although they looked ugly, it did not affect their use. The gnolls had mastered the casting process, but there was no way to forge complete armor. They could only use simple smelting methods. There were a dozen ragged corpses around this group of gnolls. Unsurprisingly, this group of gnolls had killed them with the flail. After seeing Su Len and the others, the gnoll leader let out a roar to the sky. The sound even covered the noisy battlefield. Human! The tall gnoll's eyes were blood-red. It looked at Su Len with a murderous gaze. The heavy flail in its hand swung, and the iron ball scraped the air. The sharp sound of the flail breaking through the air was frightening. There was no doubt about the power of the flail when it was swung. Standing in front of you is the demon of the abyss, the king of gnolls, the master of the realm of Yeenagu, the descendant of the powerful demon Lord Yeenagu, Hog the Skull Crusher. Damn humans! How dare you invade the territory protected by the great king of gnolls? I will smash all your heads and sacrifice them to the king of gnolls. A powerful sacrifice will definitely make the king of gnolls give me more power. Are you done? Sullen's wrist trembled slightly, and the fine steel spear shook slightly. The blood on the spear instantly slid down, revealing the still bright body of the spear. These may be the last words of your life. Please cherish them. Su Len spun the spear and held it upright. Arcs of electricity jumped and flashed around his body. Soon, more and more electricity gathered on his body and weapon. He stood at the front of the cone-shaped formation, like the god of thunder in the myths. The barbarians behind him were in high morale, and they looked at Su Len with worship. Gnoll warriors, pick up your weapons, smash their heads, and sacrifice them to the gods. Cranium Crusher Hog let out an angry roar. A strange power spread out from his body and quickly enveloped the gnolls around him. Divine art, bloodthirsty rage. The eyes of the hundreds of jack-o'-lanterns were instantly bloodshot, and their bodies swelled like balloons. The blood vessels in their bodies also swelled up one by one. Their rapid breathing made them even more restless, and cracks appeared on their armor, which was originally quite fitting. The leader of the gnolls laughed grimly, then waved the flail at Su Len, and then rushed over with a howl. Thunder Spear. Su Luen's clear voice penetrated the whole battlefield. A large amount of thunder and lightning burst out from his body, accompanied by the crackling sound of bones. His body directly soared to 2 meters, and streaks of lightning constantly jumped around his body. Seeing the gnolls charging at him, Su Len did not show any signs of weakness. He directly met them, waving the spear in his hand, and the gnolls in front of him flew back at an even faster speed. Almost all of the gnolls were killed in one hit. Their bones were broken, and the surface of their bodies was scorched black by the electricity. In the blink of an eye, 7 or 8 gnolls were dead. Lightning flashed, thunder roared, and fire burst forth. Su Len was like a bulldozer, pushing forward without stopping. The gnolls could not stop him at all, and they did not even slow down Su Len. Whirling cherry, for gang cheese appeared as the spear rotated. The gang cheese mixed with lightning and instantly exploded in all directions. The gang cheese and lightning were like countless sharp swords. The surrounding jack-o'-lanterns were paralyzed by the lightning and then penetrated by the gang cheese. The jack-o'-lanterns' bodies were cut into pieces and turned into charcoal. A vacuum area with a radius of 4 meters was cleared out around Su Luen. Chapter 46. The huge casualties did not make the gnolls afraid. After being buffed by bloodthirsty rage, their rationality had been reduced to the lowest point. They had no fear at all and continued to charge towards Su Len. Facing the frenzied gnolls, the barbarian guards had no intention of retreating. The barbarian guards had already killed countless gnolls. Seeing the gnolls provoking them, Johnson roared angrily. Berserk! The gnolls' tight formation Su Len was directly broken. The barbarian guards following behind all roared. Immediately after, their muscles slightly bulged, and a powerful force emerged from their bodies. The weight of their equipment was obviously reduced in an instant. The berserk barbarian warriors did not waste any time and instantly rushed into the gap created by Su Len. The battle became abnormally fierce as soon as it began. The barbarian warriors wielding two-handed axes cut through the gnolls' defenses. The heavy armor did not provide much protection as flesh and blood flew everywhere. In just a moment, the gnolls were dead. Seeing that a large number of gnolls had died while only a few humans had suffered light injuries, Hog finally could not hold it in anymore and charged forward with a roar. He waved the heavy flail in his hand and instantly clashed with a barbarian warrior. The sound of the hammer and axe colliding rang out. The barbarian's axe was flipped over, and then the hammer hit his breastplate and sent him flying. Fortunately, the breastplate from the blacksmith shop was of high quality. The breastplate forged from fine iron was only slightly deformed. After knocking down the barbarian warrior, Hog did not have the slightest intention of letting him go. The flail in his hand drew an arc and once again swung towards the barbarian warrior. At this moment, a battle axe suddenly swept over. Not only did it directly send the flail flying, but it also continued to chop towards Hog. Hog's arm turned, and the flail turned in the air and once again smashed towards Johnson. Immediately after, there was the sound of metal colliding as the giant axe and the flail collided once again. Johnson waved his battle axe and pressed forward again. The heavy battle axe in his hand was like a windmill, and the sound of metal colliding continuously rang out. Clang, clang, clang. Hog swung the flail, and the shrill sound of the flail breaking through the air was constantly heard. However, after each collision, he took a step back, and the expression on his face became more and more angry. Although the chain was also a heavy weapon, it did not have an advantage in this kind of continuous battle. In the past, he always relied on his strength to suppress his opponents. He did not expect to be suppressed today. Under a series of attacks, Hog's body kept retreating, leaving a row of deep footprints on the ground. Su Luen once again swept across, and several jack-o'-lanterns were swept away by a huge force, which twisted their bodies out of shape. After killing these gnolls, he turned around and saw that the barbarian guards were killing the rest of the gnolls with all their might, while Johnson was constantly reducing Hog's living space. At this rate, the battle would end soon. Su Len did not care about Johnson's battle. This was Johnson's battle. As the leader of the barbarians, Su Len needed to kill him with strong strength. This was also the honor of the barbarians. A gnoll suspected to have the thin bloodline of Yinagu, the king of gnolls, was definitely a manifestation of his bravery. Su Len looked around. At this time, the whole camp was still in a state of chaos. However, without the barbarian guards around to prevent fire, the speed of the spread of the fire was obviously slowed down. At the same time, the leaders of some small tribes took advantage of this opportunity to gather the defeated troops. Su Len took out the wind dragon flag from the storage space, and the wind elements surrounded him. He took a deep breath and injected the magic in his body into it. Then a violent wind element appeared, and a sudden north wind blew in the wilderness. The north wind whistled and swept across the battlefield, followed by an even more violent north wind. Tornado! The howling northern wind continued to swirl. In just a few breaths, it formed two tornadoes that were dozens of meters tall. Then, the two tornadoes moved quickly on the battlefield. Wherever they passed, everything, including the goblins, kobolds, gnolls, and even the burning tents, were swept up. Some tents were torn into countless pieces, and then fell in all directions with sparks. A large number of sparks fell on the tents, and the dry tents were quickly ignited. In just a few minutes, the whole camp was on fire. The two tornadoes continued to rage, rolling up a large number of flames. With the help of the wind, the flames spread faster. Soon, the two tornadoes became fire tornadoes. Countless goblins, gnolls, kobolds, and even trolls who did not have time to escape were caught in them. In a few breaths, they were burned to death by the flames, and then the fat in their bodies provided more fuel for the flames. The fire tornadoes moved quickly on the battlefield, and the tribal leaders who wanted to gather the soldiers became the targets of the fire tornadoes. The fire tornadoes swept across, and all the soldiers and tribal leaders were caught in them. After a few screams, there were no more sounds. A large number of flames flew from the fire tornadoes. The gnolls had a thick layer of fur, and when the flames landed on them, it was easy to ignite them. One by one, the gnolls became human torches. Because the tribes did not belong to each other, the camp, which was in chaos after the night attack, finally collapsed completely at this moment. The tornadoes raged for about 10 minutes, and then slowly dissipated. The whole camp had become a sea of fire, and only the open space where Su Len and the barbarian guards were was not included. Just a moment ago, Johnson had swept away Hogg's chain with his heavy axe and chopped off Hogg's wrist with a chop. Then, he followed up with another chop with his axe. Hogg's head the size of a watermelon instantly flew up, and Hogg's body fell down. Johnson reached out and picked up the ferocious head, then raised it high and roared at the sky. "What the hell are you roaring for?" Su Len rubbed his ears and kicked him until he was rolling on the ground. "Go clean up the battlefield and help the injured brothers." Johnson immediately went to work with his tail between his legs. With Hogg's death, the most powerful Gnoll tribe in the Allied army was eliminated. As for the remaining Gnolls who escaped, they would probably immediately move away from this area, and this land would officially become Sullen's territory. The fire raged, and Su Len did not care about the escaping monsters. He turned around and left the camp with the barbarian guards. As for capturing captives, Su Len did not even have 40 people with him this time. In such a chaotic battlefield, there was no hurry to capture captives. At this time, except for the gnolls, and gnolls in the camp, most of the rest had died in the Sea of Fire, and a small number were directly killed by Su Len and the others. After the night attack, the tribes in the nearby wilderness disappeared at this moment. Chapter 47. Congratulations, host. You have obtained an epic victory. Under your command and leadership, a small army of 36 people successfully launched a night attack and fire attack on the Wasteland Tribe's allied forces. You have obtained a glorious victory. All the surrounding Wasteland tribes have been defeated by you. You have obtained the true ownership of this wasteland. Your name has spread far and wide. Some of the smaller tribes are filled with fear of you. Your victory has caused the other tribes to raise their eyebrows. Prestige +3. The battle has ended. You have killed 2,375 enemies. 3 of your barbarians have been injured. You have obtained 28,743 experience points. Your level has been raised. Congratulations, host. You have received 2 free attribute points and 2 skill points. You have obtained a golden chest. Congratulations, host. You have defeated an army of 100 times your size 3 times in a row. You have received the title 1 against 100. 1 against 100. After obtaining this achievement, You and your hero's army will have a permanent +10 morale. Command +10. In this battle, you have obtained 30 tempered iron essence. You have obtained the skill Crimson Flame. Su Len added the 2 attribute points to his strength. His strength had increased to 33. Name: Sullen Race. Human Strength, 33 Agility, 29 Spirit, 24 Vitality, 29 Charm, 19 Skills. Omitted, not the word count. Su Len looked at his attribute panel. The rewards from this battle were quite generous. Apart from the basic attributes, he had also obtained an achievement title. Both morale and command were increased by 10 points. This increased the overall strength of his troops. In the long run, it was worth it. The Crimson Flame skill was also quite good. Its effect was to summon flames in an area. It was quite good for setting fire, but the area of effect was a bit small. It could only cover a dozen square meters. With the 2 skill points, Su Len thought for a moment and upgraded the Thunder Gun. It became the Thunder Lightning Gun. Its effect was to increase his attributes and increase his lightning damage. After using his attribute points and skill points, Su Len deliberately washed his hands with water. Then, he took a deep breath and opened his storage space. At this moment, there were many things piled up inside. Aside from the tempered iron essences, there was also a golden treasure chest. This was the second time Su Len had opened a golden treasure chest, so he had some experience. He opened the golden treasure chest, and the golden light disappeared. Palm-sized token appeared before him. Congratulations, host! You've obtained a recruitment token. Recruitment token. This is a token with a magical ability. After using it, you can recruit people for your territory. The effect depends on the situation around your territory. Looking at the attributes of the recruitment order, Su Len was overjoyed. This was truly a timely help. One must know that he was currently worrying about how to recruit people. Although the territory had a large population, the number of free people was too small. Relying on slaves was not a solution. He picked up the recruitment token and played with it for a while. The material used to make the token was neither gold nor wood. It was very strange. One side of the token was engraved with the word recruit, while the other side had a drawing of a person. After looking at it for a while, Su Len chose to use the recruitment token. A light flashed, and the recruitment token disappeared. The host has used the recruitment token. In the next month, the host's territory will become more attractive to other intelligent races such as humans, gnomes, gnolls, kobolds, trolls, and other hostile creatures. That's it? Su Len waited for a long time, but nothing happened. He did not see anyone. If there are no humans around my territory, does that mean I can't recruit people? System? Say something. UF***Ker. My territory is in the wilderness. Where can I find free people in the wilderness? This is a huge loss. When Su Len heard the system's notification, his face instantly darkened. System, this is a fake product. Compensate me for my golden treasure chest. Seeing that no one appeared, Su Len kept calling the system. However, the system in his mind did not respond. No matter how he called, the system did not respond. After a while, Su Len could only accept it helplessly. The fire burned until 10 o'clock in the morning before gradually extinguishing. The original camp of the Tribal Alliance army had completely disappeared, leaving only a charred empty space. Other than that, there were also a large number of burnt corpses. Su Len had already started to retreat with the barbarian guards. In the battle in the early morning, only a few of the barbarian guards were injured. The most seriously injured one of them was the one who was sent flying by the Gnoll leader Hog's chain. One of his ribs was broken. Su Len used a physical healing spell on him. Green life energy enveloped him, and soon his injuries were completely healed. Because this battle was a night attack and a fire attack, there were not many spoils of war. The Gnolls had at least a few hundred pieces of iron armor and weapons. The best set was the one on the Gnoll leader. Although they killed more than 2,000 enemies in this battle, there were definitely more who escaped. In the end, Su Len and the others only captured more than 200 captives in this battle. The fate of these captives was to be captured and sent to the camp as laborers. When they left, it only took them 5 or 6 hours to rush back. When they came back, they brought many captives with them. They walked for a whole day. In the evening, Su Len and the others finally returned to the territory. Seeing that they had returned with a great victory, the people who stayed in the territory could finally breathe a sigh of relief. There was no other way. This territory could only stand in the wilderness because of the strength of Su Len and the barbarian guards. After knowing that Su Len had wiped out the tribal alliance army in the wilderness, the whole territory was excited. Su Len was also very excited. He directly announced that there would be a victory banquet tonight. He asked his subordinates to go to the warehouse and take out the stored ale and dried meat. He also asked the barbarians to slaughter a few spotted antelopes. A bonfire was lit in the open space outside the Lord's castle, and a simple bonfire party began. Although the bonfire party was very simple, the barbarians were still very happy. The party went on until late at night, and more than 10 barrels of ale were all drunk. Then, these drunk barbarians were single-handedly carried back by their respective tigresses. After defeating all the tribes in the wilderness around the territory, Su Len finally gained a foothold in the wilderness. After the territory was safe, Su Len began to think about the future development of the territory. As a territory, the territory had to ensure that it had enough military power. This required a lot of money. In the past, there had been powerful nobles who had also defeated the tribes around the wilderness. In the end, very few of them were able to hold on for a long time. The cost of maintaining a powerful army in the wastelands was so great that even a count would feel the pinch. Chapter 48. A cavalryman would cost 70 kinnur a year, including at least 10 kinnur to maintain the horses, at least 10 kinnur for weapons and armor, and the salary of the soldiers. In the Kingdom of Florence, a cavalryman's monthly salary was 1 kinnur, which was 12 kinnur a year. In addition, a cavalryman had to be accompanied by at least 2 auxiliary soldiers. Although the cost of these auxiliary soldiers was not as high as the cavalryman, it was not a small amount in a year. This did not include the value of the horses and the loss rate of the horses. A qualified war horse would cost at least 30 kinnur. The horses of the cavalrymen would often be damaged, which was another large expense. In addition, as a pioneering territory, the early materials had to be transported from the country, which caused the cost of a cavalryman to be far more than 70 kinnur. Sometimes it would even double. Therefore, the basic cost of maintaining a 1,000-man cavalryman in the pioneering territory would cost 100,000 kinnur. This was only the cost of the army. The cost of building the territory, recruiting orders, and purchasing slaves would not be lower than this. Therefore, although pioneering territory seemed to be a very glorious thing, when it was done, one would find that without a strong financial support, it was simply impossible to do so. The annual income of a count's territory plus other income was about 100,000 kinnur. How many pioneering nobles could come up with this amount of money? Even if they could come up with so much money, the investment would have to be reaped. How much could they reap from the pioneering territory? The biggest gain would be land. If it was just farming, the investment would not be recovered for at least 20 years. Of course, there were some pioneering territories that did not cost too much, but most of those territories were close to human cities. There were not many surrounding wilderness tribes, and they were weak. They only needed to maintain a small army to protect the territory, and the transportation of various materials was also close. The amount of kinnur spent was not much, but these places had long been occupied. These pioneering territories could not be taken by just anyone. For example, Sullen's pioneering order clearly stated that he had to be 300 miles away from Blackstone City to establish his territory. Otherwise, the Kingdom of Florence had the right to take back the territory. As for the nearest expansion orders, they only needed to be 50 miles away from Blackrock City. Of course, there was a limit to this expansion order. The territory could only be within a radius of 10 miles. Although there were many benefits to developing a territory close to the city, the territory was very small. More importantly, there were very few mineral resources. After all the valuable minerals had been discovered close to the city. Although Sullen's territory was far away, there was no requirement for the size of the territory. In theory, as long as you were strong enough, you could always expand outwards. However, in reality, it was very difficult for most people to defend their territory. Expanding outwards was even more impossible. Then, did anyone succeed? This was for sure. Some lucky bastards discovered gold, silver, and other precious minerals when they were developing their territory. Immediately, a large number of nobles and merchants would come to support them. They would help them develop their territory and provide them with resources, all for the right to mine gold and other precious minerals. There were also some protagonists who discovered mithril in silver mines and received support from a large number of wizards. Mithril was a very important magic metal. It was very rare. In the Second Age of the Elves, it was a very precious metal. Many powerful magic equipment made by the elves used mithril. The distribution of mithril was completely irregular, and the reserves of mithril that had been discovered so far were very small. Most of the mithril ores were associated with silver ores. If there was an ounce of mithril produced every year, then the mine could be called a rich mine. However, this kind of mine was very rare. Many mines that produced mithril only produced 3 to 5 ounces a year. If mithril was found in Sullen's territory, then within 3 days, a group of wizards would come to support him in developing his territory. If he wanted resources, he would have resources. If he wanted Kinnar, he would have Kinnar. The wizards would even help him in person. However, mithril was something that could only be obtained by luck. Sulen didn't think he was that lucky. At this point, his territory had to find a profitable place as soon as possible. Whether it was gold, silver, or even copper, iron, or other resources in his territory, he could use these resources to attract merchants to trade. With merchants, Sulen could obtain all kinds of resources, collect taxes, and then use these resources to slowly develop his territory. After solving the external problems, Sulen brought a few barbarian warriors to look for minerals in his territory. His goal was an iron mine. When he was fighting with the gnolls, goblins, kobolds, and trolls, Sulen found that these tribes had a small amount of iron. The iron was crudely made, the quality was poor, and there was even slag that had not been taken out. Even a blacksmith's apprentice's craftsmanship was better than this, but they were still iron. Not long ago, Sulen had interrogated the captives and obtained the approximate location of this iron mine. Then he brought a few barbarian warriors to look for minerals. Speaking of which, Sullen's barbarian guards had all evolved into barbarian warriors, and a small half of them had even become barbarian axe warriors. Any one of them could easily defeat a knight. According to the information given by the gnolls, the iron mine was located in the northeast of the territory, about 50 miles away from the camp. Sulen and the others were very fast. After 2 hours, they were close to the target area. To Su Luan's surprise, the location of the iron mine was easy to find. They only patrolled a few times here and found the iron mine. The iron mine was located on a hill, bare and sparsely vegetated. Looking from a distance, there was nothing else. After approaching, they found many traces of excavation on the other side of the hillside. When they arrived, they also found some kobolds gathered here. They found a mine and even gave away miners. This was a good thing for Sulen. Sulen casually picked up a stone from the ground. It was slightly heavy and had a reddish-brown appearance. If he was not wrong, it was an iron ore. From the looks of it, this iron ore was of good quality. I didn't expect this to be an open-air mine. Looking at the mine in front of him, Sulen was very excited. One had to know that there was a big difference between an open-air mine. Although some minerals were rich in reserves, they were very difficult to mine. Some were even impossible to mine. Some were buried in the mountains or underground and needed to be excavated. The simplest open-air mine was the one in front of him. There was no need to excavate. They could just mine directly. You're tuning in to the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.